Hello and welcome back to Museum Technologies. I talked this time about three areas within which I'm considering this topic. Preservation, the keeping and protecting of stuff. Presentation or education, the showing off of stuff, teaching people about the stuff. And the back end promotion, business side of things where you're keeping the doors open, you're paying the rent by getting people through the door, you're doing advertising, you're keeping track of the people who are members, that kind of thing. I didn't show this slide last time, but it fits in with the preservation aspect of things we've been talking about, related to technologies related to light in the museum in the preservation of artwork or specimens. You can see here a light meter, which measures light intensity, probably in foot candles or lux or lumen. Light can damage art in two major ways. One is just through exposure over time to light waves. There's such a thing as wave-particle duality of light, right? At any rate, there's something striking the surface of artwork just based on exposure to light of any wavelength. And then there's damage due to exposure to light from ultraviolet light. Ultraviolet light, in the same way that it can give you a sunburn, it does damage to potential damage to the surface of artwork. So those are the two things that you have to look at protecting artwork from, are just light exposure and exposure to ultraviolet. Also concurrent with those many times is damage due to heat, because when you have things under a lamp, often they'll get hot depending on the kind of lamp. That's why LED is a big new thing in museums. So in addition to the light meter here, I've also got pictures of an ultraviolet filter tube being placed over a fluorescent light bulb. This would go over the bulb in the fixture, and it cuts out the ultraviolet wavelengths of light that would be reaching your artwork. And on the right are two kinds of indicators that show changing color due to light. The blue wool is a classic museum standard because it fades at a known rate through exposure to light. And so you can compare how fast or slow that's happening if you put a sample of blue wool cards into your exhibit display space. So that's what I wanted to say about light. Moving along in the preservation side of things is just knowing what you've got and where it is, right? You can't keep it and keep it well if you can't find it. So there are many ways in which museums are able to track objects. It boils down on one end to having a unique identifier assigned to the object. Usually an accession number is what plays this role in museums. On the far right image on this slide, you can see the bottom of a piece of pottery, and it says that it's got a number on it, 1884.41.42. A very common method of numbering things in museums, as you may know, is a three-part numbering system where the first part reflects the year in which something was collected. The second part is the group number within that year, a group of things that had come in. So this might be the 41st group of things that came in 1884. And the last part of the number is the item within the group. So this would be the 42nd object potentially in the 41st group of things that came in the year 1884. But that aside, it could have been a number 1. It could have been a letter A. As long as you didn't reuse whatever your unique identifier is, then we can say that object is represented by that identifier, and only that object. So once you've got a unique identifier, then how you track it, maybe as far as the information, it might be in a database, but how you physically track it can be visually, looking at the number that's been written on the bottom of this piece. It could be through barcoding, like a library book. You might have experienced that at some point, or groceries at the grocery store where things are identified via barcode. And then on the left, you've got here RFID chip, I guess you would call it. They can make a very small, and it doesn't even need necessarily to have a power source chip that you can attach to an object, and when it passes under a sensor, it bounces back a signal. So you could put information on that, like an ID number, and pass a reader over it and get your object ID back. It's got many applications technologically in museums, this kind of thing, where you could have this sort of passive reading so that you could track movement potentially as well of objects and what gallery they were in or what storage space they were in, that kind of thing as well. If you take the link below about the monochrome monitor, you'll see how it looked when I started off in my career doing data entry at the Bowers Museum. Things have come a long way with the graphic user interface since the 1990s, so it really does make a difference. So yeah, databases. There are some lists available through these links of, these are commercial products that are developed with museums in mind as customers for the most part, and you will see that as we look through things in the class, as we look through different sites and references and articles, some of these are referred back to because some of them have become fairly ubiquitous, fairly popular in the field, and are used by more and more institutions. So they'd almost become a kind of de facto standard because so many people are trying to do the same kind of things with them. Now, the link I've got posted here for the AdLib software, AdLib Museum Lite, I need to also add an additional link here for what we're probably really going to use, which is the ehive.com online application. However, I would encourage you, if you have the time and a PC, to go ahead and download and look at the Museum Lite application, because it is a little bit more robust and lets you actually play with some of those relationships and jump around, whereas eHive ends up being a little bit more of what I would call flat file, where there's really no navigation back and forth between things, but you can keep a good record. So we'll look at that, and I'll definitely have that link in future notes. I'll probably post it as an additional announcement on the Blackboard site for the class. But at any rate, these are all tools for recording information, including a unique identifier for your stuff, maker information about your stuff, physical description of your stuff, important facts about your stuff, things that could be used on a label if you're doing an exhibition, all that kind of thing. In order to do both your preservation, because really you have to preserve the information while you're preserving the thing, or else it just becomes, something else. A carved stone thing from a Native American tribe might have a deep cultural meaning, but if you not tracked that information or kept it with the object, then in the end of the day, it might just be a paperweight, right? So preserving the information is important, and then also having that information then gives you a tool through which you can do the, after we talk about preservation, the presentation education side of things, because then you'll know what you're talking about, right? So that's the thing. I wanted to briefly visit technology as it's used in keeping art safe on display. Custom-made stands, and this may be fairly low-tech, from bent steel rods, bent or welded to support particular shapes. It might be acrylic vitrines on pedestals that might or might not have ultraviolet filtering built onto that plastic, but at least it also may create a sort of a small microclimate where you might be able to control locally humidity a little bit better. It might be something as complicated as base isolation systems, seismic mitigation for earthquake zones, complicated series of plates and springs or levers to allow artwork to gently move with a severe earthquake rather than standing too firmly and potentially being broken by the force. Same kind of theory that's applied when they build skyscrapers and other large architectural features today. They allow for a little bit of motion, and people have worked for a number of years now on making that possible in museum display stands as well. So that's what's shown at the lower right. Lighting a little bit again. Not only are there ways of protecting things, but also there's ways of being really fancy with your display. So again, we're moving out of preservation a little bit into the presentation education side of things. But everything from patterned displays. I think that there's a term you might or might not ever hear anywhere else except in the theater called a gobo, which is basically a cutout through which you shine a light to make a shape. There are, of course, lots of great systems for track lighting, for spotlighting, for backlighting. As I said, for museums these days, one of the leading edge, no longer cutting edge things is to convert to LED systems, because LED lights don't put out ultraviolet and don't put out much heat. And they are much more cost effective over time because they don't burn out as frequently. When I was working temporarily at the Norton Simon Museum as an art installer preparator, one of our main tasks every day was changing light bulbs before the place opened to the public. We would spend a few hours running around changing anywhere from 20 to 50 or more light bulbs every day in that facility. So if you have a light that you know is going to be good for 6 months or a year or more, then you can imagine there's a huge economic savings there. So that's a little bit about that. Interactive things like the scroll wheel here generating energy at the lower left, but creating a changing number on the display. Other video content, again, so you can see there are various levels and extremes that you can go to, and they are tools, again, to be used to supplement in an exhibition space and help the curators and exhibition designers to do their job. Again, in the presentation education side of things, there's content offered to people not physically at the museum. This can range from the production of CD and DVD content, maybe a little less popular now, then as well, and that might be videos, it might be collections of static images that you can click through. There's a wide range of ways that's been done in the past. And then, of course, you've got your websites, and those are ever-evolving methods of making a virtual visit to the museum possible and providing information about the institution. I don't think I need to explain in too great a detail. You have now, by virtue of the discussion, forum, thing, assignment, explored a few museum websites where you tried to find staff member information. So I imagine you've got some opinions about some of these yourself already. So again, these things that I've just been talking about for the presentation and education side of it in the physical exhibition space. I talked about the lighting issues. I talked about, I see the word color temperatures here. I will say that that's something that, as far as the move to LED lighting in museums, one of the things that held it back for a long time was that initially LEDs produced just one kind of cool white light, and it was not always consistent from batch to batch. And they've worked hard to make it so that, as they did with fluorescence before that, they could control output of a range of color temperatures. So you could have something that looked more like natural sunlight or more like a regular traditional incandescent light, rather than being limited to a certain look that might not be flattering for some colors and shapes and sizes in artwork. So that's an additional element of the lighting issue. We looked at the examples of mounts and seismic mitigation as an example within that, how technology can be applied in the physical exhibition space. Sound with the directional speakers, the audio tours. I didn't mention they're motion activated, but you might have those localized sound bits and bytes only come on when a person was standing in front of the artwork that it applied to or specimen that it applied to. And that might be either through virtue of them having to hit a button on the audio guide, or it might be through a motion sensor, or it might be through these days something akin to the RFID concept, where when you bring a device close, it activates. And that's being done now to not only in that technology, but also, I think, with Bluetooth. Bluetooth devices, when they enter a zone, might be connected and might trigger certain content. And then the range of interactivity possible from buttons and dials, motion sensors, use of voice, because you could have sound-activated things as well. All of that, I'm sure you have ideas and experiences through which you can relate to that. but you may not have thought about it in terms of what is the technology, what are the tools behind what's going on in the gallery space. And then the virtual or remote presentation education experience with things like websites, DVDs, CDs, etc. So I wanted today to also bring back the idea of these things in practical application. So there are some museum job listings here. And if you look at them, I want you to think about, are these jobs more related to the preservation side of things, the presentation education side of things, or the business side of things? And I think you will be able to do that fairly clearly and easily. And then when you've thought about that for those jobs, then when we're talking about these tools, you can better imagine the kind of roles that would require their use. So that's the purpose of that. Now, this relates a bit back to the database side of things. There are, but beyond that as well, into the presentation and education side of things, particularly, there are standards in this industry. I don't think I have mentioned them with you, so pardon that note on the slide. The Museum Documentation Association, I believe, is what the MDA is. This is from the United Kingdom, and it sets forward some standards for describing collections again. Now, if you are going to have something like a spreadsheet or a database, to have it be a useful tool, you have to be consistent in the way you put in information. What I mean is you might have a field called title, and you would always put the title of a painting or a book or whatever, a sculpture, into that field. If you had another field called date, you would put the date where the thing was made potentially, but you wouldn't put the title in the date field, and you wouldn't put the date in the title field. The more of these rules you can establish for consistency, the more useful your information is going to be when you go back to look at it again, and the better odds you have of somebody who's outside understanding it if you pass it to them. And that's important for the sharing of information potentially between museums. But at the least, it's important for the consistency of and usefulness of your information over time within the same institution. The Canadian Heritage Information Network also publishes some standards for how to describe collections. The International Council of Museums as well, and the American Alliance of Museums does talk about at least some standards. The links that I've placed here all relate specifically to information describing your collection data. There are standards and other components of the issues of preservation and presentation and education, but those are the ones that I've focused on here because I think it's what we're going to have the most opportunity to do hands-on between either AdLib, Museum Lite, or eHive. And it's really hard for museums to do any of the other kinds of work that they do if they can't access information about the stuff that they hold or display. It really is a fundamental component of the whole business. So, there are some videos related to some of this technology that I've collected here for you to look at. On the first one, started at about 6 minutes in, and there's a speaker there that I think is pertinent and interesting. Here's a commercial for a specific product that you'll understand when you have a look at it. And here's a brief video against the use of gallery guides, kind of complaining about some of the side effects of having the heavy use of gallery guides in a museum space. But I think as long as we're talking about technology, we should talk from time to time about the cons as well as the pros. How do people feel it has negatively impacted the museum from a visitor experience, for example, which is what this is about. So take your time and do those. You can pause this, I think, while you do that, but I'm going to go on talking. So I am asking you to do a project. I'm asking you to do a project using an online application at this site, artsteps.com. And it's a project to create a virtual exhibition. So take a look at that, and I've posted, or I will post as an announcement and in the content area for the week, the requirements for this project. Moving along, in order to get ready for the test I'm supposed to give you, here are the things I'd like you to be able to answer on the test. What are the 3 general areas that I keep breaking this thing down into? Would be a good first question. Can you name some of the higher tech tools used in the preservation side of things? For example, do you know what a data logger is? If I gave you a question describing it, would you be able to pull up the name? What good might come of having a digital camera doing digital capture? If I mentioned something about having a digital surrogate to keep the need of handling objects lower, maybe there's a way I could work something in there about that. Ultraviolet meter, if I said something about measuring wavelengths of light that might be potentially harmful to artwork, things along those lines. So you might look back at that slide and listen to that bit and see what some of the tools were that I've described. What does it do and why do we care? Again, so relating to some of these things, if it's a tool that reports temperature and humidity, we care about that because changes in temperature and humidity might damage artwork. If it's a tool that produces a digital image, it might save handling of the original and allow sharing in many ways. If it measures ultraviolet light, that is something that we know is potentially damaging to artwork, and that's something we would want to avoid. You can hopefully see the connections there. What did it replace, supplement, or improve upon? When I talked about the, excuse me there, again, so what did it replace, supplement, improve upon? For the measurement of temperature and humidity, where you've got data loggers now, you used to have hygrothermometers, thermohygrometers that had a pen that graphed on paper the changes, and the tool that we used, of course, to calibrate those, the sling psychrometer, the funny thing that you swing around over your head with the wet bulb and the dry bulb to measure the difference in temperature and calculate the relative humidity. Those are fully replaced at this point, for the most part, by data loggers. In the time before there were digital cameras, we used to have to use film cameras or Polaroids for some things, or we were, before that, even limited to hand-drawn sketches to try to communicate about artwork visually when we were doing condition reports or putting together information for a loan or that kind of thing. And then the cards that I showed you for the measurement of changes due to light. I've also written here dosimeter. Dosimeter, according to the web, is a device, instrument, or system that measures or evaluates either directly or indirectly the quantities of exposure, absorbed dose, or equivalent dose, or their time derivatives, rates. So it would be a card, again, measuring change due to exposure in light, potentially. But I didn't say that the first time we looked through there, so the blue wool dye cards are more what I was talking about. And they are, of course, replaced by things by light meters or UV meters. And here are a couple of articles and websites that I think it would be worth your while to have a look at. This article from 2014 regarding museum adaptation to the digital age, and this Google link to the Google Art Project, which I think is an interesting application of technology for the museum world.